Dems have their swagger back. Republicans can't find their footing, and JD Vance is giving America the creeps. Let us rejoice today. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54. Ravi has been gone for a couple of weeks. We were just discussing that he picked the right first week, and then the second week was really fun. So welcome back.
Did I miss anything, Jason?
No, nothing. Everything is the same, but better.
I mean, unbelievable how much the world has changed in the 2 weeks I was away. And I was like off the grid pretty much fully. The only information I was getting was via despondent text messages I was getting from friends. And then as the first week turned into the second, those despondent text messages were turning into gleeful text messages. And then I finally logged in to the internet, like on Instagram and stuff, on my way back. And I just got one message after another from listeners to this podcast being like, are you sick or something? Like, why were you away during this period of time? Some people thinking that the party got to me and shut me up. It's like, I love the conspiracy theories, but let's start on an exciting note. Kamala Harris has, come out the gates so strong. You and I have been texting and talking about this over the past week, but she just did what appeared to be an incredible rally yesterday in Atlanta. Let's go to a clip from that event.
So the momentum in this race is shifting. And there are signs that Donald Trump is feeling it. You may have noticed. So last week, you may have seen, he pulled out of the debate in September he had previously agreed to. So here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about that. So he won't debate, but he and his running mate sure seem to have a lot to say about me. Don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird? Well, Donald, I do hope you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
It just looks like fun, man. She's having fun. They're having fun. One of my favorite things that I don't remember who said it, but I saw it on social media was that fighting against fascism doesn't have to be done without joy.
Yeah. I think it was Anon Girdadas, I think, who was tweeting that, or one of probably many who said the same thing.
Well, it's smart. And I think it's a good reflection of how people are feeling right now. Clearly, she is having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I want to say I am so happy that she's continued the long tradition of Democratic nominees with fake Southern accents. Like, you go to Obama, to Hillary Clinton, to Kamala Harris, they're undefeated, and it's one of my favorite things about politics.
I think the Hillary one is fair, although she did live in Arkansas for a long time.
That's true.
What I will say is that I know plenty of Black people from the Northeast or from the West Coast who do have a speech pattern that they have gotten from somebody in their family.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what else. I'm just a white guy trying to speculate about these kind of things.
I love this. And as somebody who has been looking at a lot of clips from the vice presidential contenders, Josh Shapiro there's no explanation
really?
for where his Southern accent comes from. Also has a fake Southern accent. And look, as a New Yorker, I love it. I lived in Nashville. I probably dabbled myself. And it's charming.
Okay,
Nobody
let
has
me
a
say
fake New
something
York
about
accent,
this.
I would say.
Yeah,
Nobody ever fakes our accent.
That's true. Let me say something. As someone who comes from a place where G's tend to get dropped, and where I have been accused of having not a fake Southern accent, but of having a Southern accent. When
You
I
do
really
have it.
think,
You have a tinge for sure.
there's a slight. I'm aware that there's a twang sometimes to my voice, and that I sometimes will speak a little slower and all that. What I will say about this is the difference is where I'm from. Our accent is deliciously fun, and so I this is a sidebar, but I judge no one who affects even, and I think it's unconsciously when people do it, who affects an accent of, from our part of the country or further south. I'm from
Yeah, it's weird.
Kansas
Isn't
City.
Ted Lasso supposed to be from Kansas City,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah, and Jason Sudeikis, obviously, as you know, is from here, and so because it's fun, the way we talk is just more fun, and so I suspect that is part of it. When you're having fun, I mean, I know when I'm having fun, I tend to sound more like that. I know if I have a couple of drinks, there are no G's at the end of my words. It's everything ends in an apostrophe.
Well, that was sort of Harris talking about the debates and challenging Trump to the debates. I think Trump's in a bit of a bind here because if he shows up to the debate, I think it's fair to say it's going to be a lot harder than the last one he did.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't show up, he looks like he's afraid. And we'll come back to this because the calendar is not good for him. But I do want to play one more clip, Jason, and have you react to this because this, I think, gets to the core of the message that Harris has been pushing both in her speeches and in her ads. Let's go to this next clip from the rally.
Across our nation, we are witnessing a full-on assault on hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. The freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to live without fear of bigotry and hate, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride, the freedom to learn and acknowledge our true and full history, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do.
She's at the top of her game right now. I've had the good fortune of knowing her since 2016. I got to know her in 2016. We were both running for the Senate, and we did a few events together. And Kamala was good. She's always been good. She's always been a good performer. But she is just levels above where she was. She's an elite performer right now, and you can tell in things like she has that sense now, which took me a long time to learn, of when to let the crowd applaud and when to keep going and stop that applause so you can finish what you're saying, and then when to do the hardest thing, which is what she just did, which is when to find the volume and the cadence to surf the applause, to keep it going, to build their crescendo. And that's, I mean, just as an orator, she's at the top of her game. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, as you know, I've never doubted her, Jason. But
Okay.
Well, to be serious, like, she is doing infinitely better than I expected coming in here. And it's, it's worth admitting, people who listen to this podcast long enough know that I had serious questions because I had a front row seat to her primary campaign and helped get a lot of people when I was running Arena land on that campaign. And it's no secret that was not the strongest campaign. And she would probably admit that. What it reminds me of is, to use a sports analogy, is like the player who stays a couple extra years at Duke or wherever, and then emerges like as a fully formed athlete, as opposed to the person who comes out too early, like Bronny James right now in basketball, like LeBron James's son. And when I look at Harris, I'm like, she has now spent enough time to refine her skills. And
she redshirted.
She redshirted. Yeah, it's a good way to, redshirting. And when I look at her, I see somebody who arrived at the exact right time, both for her and for us politically. And it says so much about her and us, because you think about the surge of energy. I don't know if you've had this experience, but even when I worked on the Obama campaign, I did not have the experience of the amount of people reaching out to me and asking me to be involved. And I've talked to people on the campaign over the past week who've said that they literally cannot field the amount of requests for volunteers and events that they're getting.
The biggest potential weakness that Kamala Harris had as a national candidate was that she had come out of California, where she had never, and this is not her fault, right? It's just circumstance. She had really never had to win over Republicans and independents for the most part, right? I mean, one of the blessing and the curse about coming up in politics in a place like Missouri is that, my friends and I, who were sort of in my generation of Missouri politicians, by the time those of us who were on the national level were doing things on the national level, we felt like we were coming into this with like a PhD in in politics and in persuasion politics, not base politics, but persuasion politics, because everything, like, to get elected statewide in Missouri, you got to get like what, at least like what, 1 in 5, 2 in 5 Republicans to vote for you. So, which in our case didn't come from being moderate, it came from being persuasive. And so when you think about the road that Kamala had been on, she had been prosecutor, DA, and then she had been the attorney general, and then she'd been senator, and she'd done it all in California. And which meant, really, especially in San Francisco, before she went statewide, she really just needed to win over Democrats. And then when she went statewide, or when she went for Senate, at least, she went for Senate when they had the top 2 election, and it was between her and another Democrat, if I recall. Or maybe they got it down to Republican, but it wasn't a race by then. And then she goes and she runs for president in a primary, where again, you're going after Democrats. So the last couple of years, I would say, running with President Biden in 2020 was, I think, a real maturing experience. Not maturing like she needed to be matured, but I would say more like evolving experience in reaching out and bringing voters in from the middle and from across the aisle, and then being vice president for 3 years and being in charge of something like the border. Well, you're obviously constantly messaging in a way that is meant to bring people in. And so now we're looking at Kamala 2.0, a real sense of how to bring voters in and expand that political coalition. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I don't know what turnaround can you even compare this to in American politics, for the point where people were despondent? Most people we talked to thought we were guaranteed to lose just 2 weeks ago. And, I was away, but it seems like the period of time after the assassination attempt and during the week of the RNC, I was getting text messages from otherwise optimistic people saying, we cannot win. They were saying at this point. To now, and I don't want to overreact, but this is my honest emotional state today, and hopefully a little bit of logic thrown in, is I think we're going to win this election, Jason. And
I think so too. Diana said to me when right after Kamala became the nominee, became the presumptive nominee, Diana said, Democrats, if we think we're going to win, we get lazy. And if we think we're going to lose, we get dejected, and then we get lazy. She said, where we need to be is a slight underdog with a real chance to win. And that's when everybody works. And that's absolutely what is happening. And not to mention the fact that we have an opportunity to make history. We have, no matter what you may think about Kamala Harris, I know her personally, her and her husband, and like her a great deal, but you may be a person who, she doesn't do it for you politically in terms of really get you excited to Obama levels. She's a pretty darn likable person. And there's really, unless you're going to go with some unhinged Fox News, or even it's more like Newsmax conspiracy theories, unless you're going to buy into those, she's not a devious person. She's not a mean person. She's none of those things. And she is actually, I think, a very relatable person. When you dip into the world of misogyny, which is where this campaign is clearly going to go, misogyny and racism, that's where the other side is going to attack. One of the huge advantages they had on the misogyny front in pushing that with Hillary Clinton was that she, after that many years of Secret Service protection and being in high office, she wasn't all that relatable. And one of the ways that I think Obama was able to overcome is too strong a word, but I would say, push back against a lot of, natural inclinations toward racism was his relatability, was the fact that he and Michelle Obama were still paying off their student loans, when he first got into the Senate. And Kamala Harris, I think, has a very similar relatability. And somebody had said that, I don't remember who it was, who maybe it was you, I don't remember who said that she reminds people of the school principal that they liked. And I think that is a very powerful position from which to campaign.
Well, let's look at the first ad that they put out on TV. There was a separate ad that was like meant for the internet audience, but they've now started to go up on TV. It seems like they took a few days to a week to test these things out and are now doing some pretty significant buys. Let's go to this ad called Fearless.
On the border, the choice is simple. Kamala Harris supports increasing the number of Border Patrol agents. Donald Trump blocked a bill to increase the number of Border Patrol agents. Kamala Harris supports investing in new technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Donald Trump blocked funding for technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Kamala Harris supports spending more money to stop human traffickers. Donald Trump blocked money to stop human traffickers. Kamala Harris prosecuted transnational gang members and got them sentenced to prison. Trump is trying to avoid being sentenced to prison. There's two choices in this election: the one who will fix our broken immigration system and the one who's trying to stop her.
Well, okay, so apparently, our producers informing me that I think because of the Beyonce song, we can't use the Fearless ad. But this is the next step. So this is the second ad that they put out, the one that we just played. And it is a response to a Trump hit on immigration. So basically, what Trump's first ad on Kamala Harris said was essentially she was the border czar and is trying to put at her feet the so-called crisis at the border. And she put out this ad, and then she also put out a supercut of GOP leaders complaining about Trump on the border. So they're trying to go on the offense on this question. Let's play that clip that they just put out this morning on Twitter.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that on net significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you.
But I would acknowledge President Trump failed, along with Republicans, Paul Ryan and the guys. They failed in 2018 to actually move a border security bill to tighten this so that we weren't dealing with this crisis right now. They failed to actually get the wall built. President Trump signed 12 continuing resolutions after he said he would never sign another one if they didn't give him the money to finish building the wall. Look, this stuff matters. It adds up. I call balls and strikes. This is not hard.
The Speaker says that if one migrant comes across the border, that's one migrant too many, and your bill doesn't do enough to completely shut down the border.
Actually, it does completely shut down the border in many ways.
So, okay, here's what I like about this. One, I like that they are just calling him out on everything. But what I really like is that if you think about the tone of the ad that we played, they are calling out the Republicans in a way that is a little bit humorous, right? If you think about the tone of that ad, it's like for instance, when you say, she sent, people to prison for this, he's trying to avoid getting sent to prison. It is a little bit snarky, but it is not snarky to a level of arrogance, and it is not arrogant toward Republican voters or toward Americans. It is snarky, and they're doing a very good job right now of characterizing Republican politicians and Republican Party establishment folks a certain way without making the deplorables error and putting everybody in a basket and putting people on the defensive. I really hope we can keep it up, because it's sort of they're really in the pocket right now doing this, and it's exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's like this is the sort of, as you know better than anybody, the job in a race is to do two things. One is to define the candidates. Obviously, Trump is well defined, I think, in the eyes of voters. Although we'll talk a little bit about how he's, he's missing some opportunities to redefine himself. And then obviously with Harris being relatively unknown, despite being the vice president, there's a race to define who she is. And ABC News Washington Post put out a poll earlier this week that looked at, all right, first weekend, what are the numbers in terms of just how people perceive Harris? And that first week scorecard is very flattering to her. She added 10 points to her approval rating as Trump's approval rating went down by almost the equivalent amount. So he's basically squandered the post-assassination goodwill that he was getting. She has made significant gains and clawed back numbers, and in some cases exceeded previous numbers on key Democratic constituencies like young voters, Black voters, independents. And so she's doing what she needs to do in that first week. And obviously, this is it's a shorter campaign season for her than anybody in recent memory, but we still have to make it to November, right? So we don't want to declare premature victory here, but things are looking pretty good. And she's raised $200 million. The polls that have come out in the past 24 hours are unbelievable for her. So economist YouGov has her up 2. The Bloomberg Morning Consult just put out a series of polls that have her up 2 in Arizona, tied in Georgia, up 11 in Michigan, which sounds wild. I have questions about that.
Yeah, I don't buy that one.
Up 2 in Nevada, down 2 in North Carolina, down 4 in Pennsylvania, up 2 in Wisconsin. I can go through those numbers. Now, are those numbers like an objective reflection of one of the races? No. But when was the last time we saw numbers like that with the Democrat on the ticket? It's been since the last election cycle.
Yeah. And you started this conversation by saying, when's the last time we saw a turnaround like this politically? And I can't really think of it. But what I do think it is attributable to is the sweet spot in politics, as you know, is when the messenger and the message are completely intertwined. And when they're perfectly intertwined, that's when you can get this kind of momentum. And if you look at like Trump in 2016, for all of its faults, Trump was new to the political scene. His message was, I'm going to be a wrecking ball and shake things up and all that. And he was like, and if you were thinking, what would shake things, if you were a shake things up voter, and it turned out, at least in the swing states, the majority of voters were wanting to go in the shake things up direction. Well, you couldn't shake things up more than a cartoon character, or at the time really a reality show businessman character than Donald Trump. So it was the message and the messenger. The greatest example, of course, always is Barack Obama in 2008, and the whole message, you were high level on the campaign, was change, right? And if your message is change and your candidate is Barack Hussein Obama and is running to be the first African-American president in our history, well, you can't have a more perfectly melded together message and messenger. And what has, I think, changed in this election is that the American people throughout have been unhappy with the last few years. They were unhappy with the Trump years. They really haven't been that happy with the Biden years, despite the fact that there are a lot of people who acknowledge that Biden has done a good job and still don't feel that happy with those years, because they feel like there's sort of a hangover still, right, from COVID, and people aren't feeling the economic impact in a positive way yet, that kind of thing. And so your message is you want to move forward. Your message is we're not going back, right? But if you have two candidates running who, one who's 81, the other who's 77, 78, it doesn't feel like a future-oriented election. And when you change that out to somebody who would make history by being the first woman president, the first African-American woman president, the first Asian American president, all of those things, and who is a breath of fresh air and has a future-oriented message, well, now you've got message and messenger perfectly molded together. And what I love is then what did the Trump campaign do before she became the nominee? They said, let's be the forward-looking one. Let's get a youthful vice presidential candidate. And so we're going to take a break.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and then let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, I'll take a break. See, I'm so excited to talk about Vance. We'll jump in.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever scrolled through social media and felt like everyone's life is picture perfect? I know I've been there. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to other people, especially those online. But here's the thing. What you see on Instagram, TikTok is just a highlight reel. Real life is so much more complex. That's where therapy can be game changing. It helps you focus on your own journey instead of measuring yourself against others. BetterHelp makes it easier than ever to connect with a licensed therapist, and it's all online so that you could fit your sessions into a schedule that works for you. So stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/M54.
I've been working to get more exercise into my weekly routine, and I know it's important for cardiological health, let alone everything else. But it's been a struggle to sometimes find the energy to pull that off without resorting to unhealthy energy drinks. And we often think that living a more heart-healthy life means making big, unsustainable changes. But with SuperBeets Heart Chews, you can get daily blood pressure support in just 2 tasty chews a day, and they even promote heart-healthy energy without the stimulants. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in SuperBeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. SuperBeets Heart Chews have given me an incredible energy boost with no crash or negative effects on my heart. They are the easiest and most effective way that I've discovered to support my blood pressure. Double your potential with SuperBeets Heart Chews. You get a free 30-day supply of SuperBeets Heart Chews on all bundles and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using the code MAJORITY. That's getsuperbeets.com, code MAJORITY.
All right, Jason. So I've been really excited to talk about this topic, but before we get into it, just one sort of bookend to what you were just saying before, which is you and I have long talked about how Democrats need to find a way to run as the opposition. And we talked about how the Supreme Court has given us that opportunity, but it's always hard to do when you're president. It feels like we've totally captured that energy. We just need to hold on to it now. Like Trump is viewed as old hat now and as the sort of status quo. Whereas Harris, despite being the vice president, has been given, basically been treated by the voters so far as like a complete blank sheet of paper for them, which is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think part of it is she's in the unique position of being a vice president, a sitting vice president running against a former president who I think even still, as we sit here, is the front runner in the race. And so by virtue of the fact that he is the front runner, has been the front runner for a long time, I think that that is a part of it as well, right? That makes it feel like she is the opposition.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I don't know how to even start with this Vance pick. I thought it was going to be Vance. I actually said it on the Lost Debate show before I left. I was like, I think it's going to be Vance. And in part, I thought it was going to be Vance because I only knew superficially what I knew about him. You and I have covered him pretty extensively on here, but he seemed like the kind of person who, when Trump is super confident that he's going to win, he's going to want to pick the person who is the most MAGA of the people that he had on his short list. And Vance was certainly that. He wants somebody who is a perfect embodiment of somebody who has twisted himself into pretzels, in a pretzel and groveled and disgraced himself to getting Trump's good graces. So he has checked that box for Trump. And he also represents this idea that MAGA ism has a future. And here's this young guy who represents, this movement and shows that it has staying power. I guess that's the theory behind Vance. Like, do you have, before we get into the reality of Vance, like what else do you see here?
I see two reasons why they picked Vance. One, which has to do with actual strategy from the people around Trump, and the other, which just has to do with Trump's psychology, which I think is the one that carried the day. The one that has to do with the people around Trump was, we are beating the heck out of Biden. Biden's not getting out. Let's run up the score. It's hubris. It's like, let's get somebody who's going to bring the base out and who is going to make us look like the youthful alternative. And then we'll run up the score. We'll get the Senate. We'll get everything, right? That's where I think the strategic people advising him fell on Vance. Trump, look, I think Trump is like, and I've said this on here before, I think he's like every other insecure bully there is. He does not want to spend time around people who challenge him. He wants to, and he doesn't want to spend time around people who are sycophants, because he doesn't trust sycophants who are true believers in him, because if they're true believers, they could become disillusioned with him. What he wants are people who are converted to sycophancy, because if you have that, then you've broken them. You own them. And he owns J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is now well known, was an anti-Trump guy who kissed the ring, got down on one knee, and became the most Trump guy. And that's who Trump likes, because he knows that you can't change when you're that way. He learned with his last vice president that if you pick a true believer, they might be a true believer in something other than you. And he doesn't want that. He wants somebody who, has bent the knee and kissed the ring and who he owns. If this were prison, Vance would be walking around holding on to Donald Trump's pocket. And, maybe at some point there will be somebody doing that in an actual prison. I don't know. But my point is that's why I think he was chosen. And then the ground shifted underneath them, and they turned around and realized, wow, we picked a dude who was not actually terrifically popular in his own state. He actually underperformed there. Oh, and by the way, it's a state that we expected to win anyway. And his views are such that they are completely counter to the idea that he is the youthful, forward-looking candidate, because it turns out that though he is young, he has the views of someone who lived 150 years ago.
Yeah, it's hard to even... I've really wrestled with how to talk to the audience about this. And audience, here's what we're going to do is we're largely going to assume parts of the general conversation. So you're going to know that he called Trump an opioid, and that he, compared Trump to Hitler, and then has flipped on that. We're going to assume all that kind of stuff. You don't need to hear those clips. We're going to assume you've heard about this childless cat lady controversy, where he had on Tucker Carlson's show, basically talked about how the Democratic Party is run by a bunch of bitter childless cat ladies. And then, so I want to start the conversation today with the sort of new information that we have, and then we can kind of put it all together. The Harris campaign just released new audio from J.D. Vance, where he has more to say on this subject of the childless. And then I want to talk about why I think this is more than just a gaffe, and that it is revealing and quite damaging to the Republican Party and to Trump. Let's go to this clip.
The best way to invest in it is to ensure the next generation actually exists. So I think sending those signals via policy, but the cultural messaging of politicians is important. I also think, just to be a little stark about this, I think we have to go to war against the anti-child ideology that exists in our country. A few weeks ago, no, Twitter is not real life, but I forget even what caused it, but there was this ridiculous effort by millennial feminist writers to talk about why having kids was not a good thing, why they were glad they didn't have kids, and even encouraging people who had had children to talk about why they regretted having children, which of course is like
Mother's Day book.
On Mother's Day, which is like psychologically deranged to ask mothers on Mother's Day to talk about why they regretted having children. And what it made me realize is that so much of what drives elite culture is mediocre millennial journalists who haven't gotten out of their career what they thought they would, right? And the thing is, everybody can be an exceptional mother and father. Not everybody can be an exceptional journalist at the New York Times. And not enough people have accepted that if they put their entire life's meaning into their credential, into where they went to school, into what kind of job they have, if you put all of your life's meaning into that, you're going to be the sort of person who asks women to talk about how they regret having children. You're going to be a sad, lonely, pathetic person, and you're going to know it internally, so you're going to project it onto people who have actually built something more meaningful with their lives. I think we have to go to war against that ideology and the people behind it, because we need to say to the people in my hometown, I've seen this with, just to be honest, with my sister. I love my sister is just the best person. I love her to death. And sometimes, she'll say things to me like, maybe I should have delayed having kids. Maybe I should have went to school. Maybe I should have did this or that. And it's like, Lindsay, you've been a great mom. Your children are happy. They're healthy. You've taken good care of them. You've shown me, she was my older sister. She took care of me a lot in a very chaotic home. People like my sister should not feel like the cultural messaging is your life is inadequate. The people who are sending that message should feel that their life is inadequate. And of course they do. They're just too ashamed about it to talk about it.
Shall we unpack this? Would you like to go first?
I would, because my sister listens to this podcast and she called me about these comments. I didn't know about these comments until she told me originally. This was like in the middle of the Vance stuff. I was talking to her while I was upstate in my little cocoon, and she was like so incensed about these comments because she has, at the moment, has decided not to have kids and has no intention to, and has felt judged by people in her life about this who are part of this corner of the internet that Vance represents. And I have to say, like, of all the weird scandals that have happened politically within the right, I've heard from more people in my life who are not that political, and I would count my sister among those types of people who are not very political, who are just really upset and angry about this. And it spans the gamut of people who can't have kids, decide not to have kids, can't afford to have kids like you, but who feel like this is like a really unfair attack on people who have, for one reason or another, don't decide to participate in family life in that way. And it's just like, I don't even, it's such a, even the right wing figures like Trey Gowdy did a 2-minute thing on Fox News the other night attacking Vance on this before he brought Vance on. Ben Shapiro, by the way, who is trafficking in these ideas, had to do his own segment where he's like, yeah, I think the way he put it was dumb. But even the Ben Shapiro, if you go back, he's been saying
Holly today had to say it was not a good thing to say,
because they're hearing from their own constituents. Like, there are so many people out there who decide not to have kids. A good example is Dave Portnoy at Barstool, who is, it's safe to say, not a Democrat. He was like, I thought this guy was a Republican. He's a moron. Which, if I were talking to Portnoy, maybe you should check your assumptions about that. But it's like, this is not a popular comment. And obviously there are tons of people who are not Republicans who've taken offense to this, Jennifer Aniston being one of them, who's like one of the most sympathetic figures in American life. Yeah. This is extremely dumb, and it has backfired, and Vance has had every opportunity to clean it up. He went on Megyn Kelly, he went on Gowdy, and he has not cleaned it up. He has defended it.
Well, Ravi, as someone who has children and therefore is in a higher social caste, apparently,
yeah. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone first. I should have.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, I should have.
Yeah, know your place. Know your place. Your childless place. Yeah. We joke about that, but the truth is, he's not talking about you or me, because he's talking about women.
Yeah,
and that's. And my first observation.
Well, because it's sad if a woman doesn't have kids. It's
right.
It's admirable and almost like, I feel like I'm like in this Clint Eastwood mold in his head because I'm a dude, exactly. Right? And I decided to do it. It's my rugged independence at work, right?
Right. And so one observation about Vance is that the fellow spends altogether too much time online.
Way too much time.
If he is, as a Republican senator, if he is taking note of what a very small sliver of the feminist left is saying, and like what a hashtag is on that, then that I had never heard about, and I'm sure you had never heard about. If that's the kind of thing that is intriguing to him, then he's far too online, right? And therefore has no perspective on what the real conversation in the country is. But let's talk about the way he's defining this having kids thing. First of all, I think it is odd, you might even say weird, to have a Marine who seems to derive a greater sense of superiority from having procreated than from being a Marine. I know a lot of Marines, and they all have a real sense of superiority. And I say this with love to Marines. I work with a lot of them. I've served with them. And, you know, it's just sort of, as soon as they get their globe and anchor, they're like, well, now I'm better than everyone else. And it's charming, and it's kind of part of their esprit de corps. But he's a Marine who derives his sense of superiority not from being a Marine, but from having made children. That's kind of funny. But I think specifically the way he's doing this is insidious, and it's actually a cousin to the way Hawley writes about manhood, because what it is they are defining womanhood in a certain way. Okay, this is the Harrison Butker, what you really want to be is a homemaker sort of approach. And that is, if look at his policies. JD Vance doesn't want a woman to be able to choose when to start a family or whether to start a family. Also opposes policies that would make it easier for women to have families, take paid leave for maternity, extended paid leave, and then re-enter the workplace without missing a beat. Opposes that sort of thing. And at the same time is saying that a woman who has not had a child through childbirth is therefore disqualified to be president of the United States. So my wife a little while ago put this really plainly to me. She said, I don't know in what world people thought our society was set up in such a way that the first woman president would have also been a mom who, you know, was not a stepmom, but had been a mom and had to take months off from work. And her point, I think, and let me just, since she's not here, I guess I will mansplain it. I don't know if that counts as mansplaining or summarizing, is basically that we have stacked the deck professionally against women in the workplace, political or otherwise, so substantially that for a woman to reach a pinnacle like that, clearly it would have been especially difficult for the first woman to do that, to have also taken a break from her career, as somebody like JD Vance would say that they should have, in order to start a family. And so that's the catch-22. And I think that's why it's resonating, particularly with women so much, because it is A, total BS, and B, patently unfair and basically a trap set up to completely disqualify women from positions of authority, either in the corporate or political world.
Yeah, what's also fascinating about this is JD Vance, from what I understand, was adopted by his stepfather and changed his name, and which is great for, like, that's great that happened, and I think it gets to the unconventional nature of parenthood in American society. What is not great is that the examples he gave at the time when he was making these comments were Mayor Pete, who was in the middle of adopting with Chasten, and Harris, who herself has inherited children through her marriage and has a great relationship with her kids.
And by the way, with her husband's former wife. I don't know.
Right, which of course is really easy to do.
Right. Yeah, I think that's commendable that they worked hard and made a blended family.
And both our examples are if you have a true belief in family, right? And Pete has been so good on this stuff for so long, which is like, if you truly believe in family and the values of family, right? And you don't want to just use it as this divisive concept to tell people who are gay or people who can't have kids that they're other, right? Like, if you're truly dedicated to children and their well-being, then these less conventional ways of parenting are wonderful because it brings stability to children, right? And Vance should know more than anybody else the power of this. And you know what, Jason? He does, which is what makes him a particularly evil figure in American life. Because the people who know better and say the things that he's doing, I have a harder time with them than the clowns like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are just lunatics, right? Like, those people are just sad to me. I think of her the way I think of, like, the people when I lived in the Bowery who used to shout in the middle of the night at nothing in particular. Those are people who need a lot of help. And I actually have empathy for those people. People like Vance are calculated politicians who, on the one hand, the New York Times did really good reporting on this. On the one hand, are sending these emails to trans classmates that are incredibly thoughtful. And, they know the language, at least, of what it means to be a considerate person and to have empathy. But then they flip when it's in their they view it as in their personal interest, and then they become hateful. Like, what's so interesting to me about Vance is that he has now gotten here, right? He gets the vice presidential nod, and the right politics here to win this election, and this is also a problem Trump has long had, is to smooth out your edges and say, look, like, I have these strong beliefs. I believe in the forgotten person, et cetera. But let me broaden out the conversation and say, you are welcome in this coalition. Join us, right? There's a place for you at the table, which is certainly the way Harris has been treating this campaign. You pivot towards the middle in the general election, according to any sane version of politics. But he's in some ways doubled down since he's been picked and become even more divisive, which is both dumb electorally, but also I think speaks to maybe how his transformation has become something truly permanent in his soul.
Well, and maybe it's all rooted in the idea that hate comes oftentimes from personal insecurity, right? And it's clear to me, I mean, Donald Trump is a walking bowl of orange insecurity. And it turns out JD Vance is insecurity with a beard, because when you target people for this sort of hate and exclusion, it comes from your own insecurity. But what has powered a lot of, particularly in my part of the country, a lot of the attraction of Donald Trump has been, he doesn't like the people that I don't like. But the difference is that Donald Trump has expressed hate for the most part toward people. And this is not wholly true, but when it comes to the coasts and what people call the coastal elites, it has gone toward people who folks where I'm from assumed those people didn't like them or didn't understand them. And so then when he doesn't like those people, it's like, well, this is our guy, right? But so when you try to express hatred or exclusion toward people who your own base, or at least the people you're trying to get, don't feel any animosity toward those people and don't feel like those people have any animosity toward them, well, that's when it gets into this new messaging, which is weird. And I am curious what you think about this pivot, because it is, I think, partially a function of post-assassination attempt, a certain degree of measure of saying we don't want to double down on, while we do believe that democracy could hinge on who wins this election, that messaging doesn't feel as resonant right now. So it's interesting because I feel like we are so far able to cast as weird people like Vance without saying people who might be inclined to vote for him are also weird. And I'm curious if you think that that's working and if it's going to keep working.
I am a big fan of this messaging because it's true.
Yeah, it feels true, right?
And it's the kind of thing that the right has been really good at over time. And in some ways, members of our coalition have leaned into various caricatures of the left and have made it easy to paint us in a certain way. What has happened over time, though, is that the left and the Democratic Party have unweirded ourselves. And I think evidence of that is just, if you just listen to Harris, she has quietly, because I think she's been given such benefit of the doubt on the extreme left, she's saying one moderate thing after another. She's like clarifying her fracking and this and that. And guys, honestly, there's certain things that even people view me as a moderate. I'm like, whoa, this is even more like, yeah, that's more quote unquote moderate.
I'm like, I don't like fracking, but I do like winning Pennsylvania.
Exactly. Right.
where we're at.
Well, and obviously a fracking magnate owns the bills, so that takes precedent over
Didn't know
all
that.
things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that
so-
changed. Now I have to rethink.
Yeah. So, but this is it's one of the many triumphs of Harris's 2 weeks is that she has quietly like tacked toward the center, which again is how you win general elections, without paying a price that a lot of people would pay, which is a superpower, right? It was a superpower Obama had because he came out, and for him it was a combination of things, but it was in part because he had built such goodwill over the Iraq War, which was the single issue, right? This is a good frame, I think, because it is accurate. It's not like the message, right? But what it does is it gives you like an emotionally negative reaction in a frame to be like when you see people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and the people that Trump keeps by his side, and then you see Vance, there's something off with him, right? And you're able to universalize it to say, all right, the thing that you experience when you hear Vance, now you could transfer that to the experience of watching a Trump rally. And now we can give you language for it. We can give you a frame for it, right? And so I think this is smart.
Yeah, I think weird is a much more relatable word than cringe. And I think I agree. I think it's working. Speaking of weird, let's check in with former President Donald Trump and what he's been up to here lately. Let's go to this clip where he basically tells people that this might be the last election if he wins.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. Sounds like when he says I'm not a Christian, but I think he says I am a Christian. He sure sounds like a Christian to me, Jason.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He talks about them the way I would talk about people if I went to like a Battlestar Galactica conference. I'd be like, yeah, but actually I do like Battlestar Galactica, but pick something else, Star Trek. And I'd be like, I love you, Trekkies. I'm a fellow Trekkie, is what he sounds like he's saying. Yeah.
The comparison is that movie, The Campaign, where Will Ferrell's character, there's a montage of him going to different audiences and telling them, he's like, Indonesian carnival workers are the backbone of this country. And then he's like, Malaysian custodians are the backbone of this country. I mean, there is a real reel about this with Eric Adams, where he goes to one group after another and he's like, Port-au-Prince is the New York of yada yada, or New York is whatever. And it's like he does this to every community. He says the same line. Well, look, as somebody who opened like 30 speeches in a row with the same joke, let's not go too hard on this sort of thing. All right. What is this other clip I see in the outline? The I haven't changed clip.
Oh yeah, I'll play it for you and I'll explain why I think this is more important than the clip we just played. All right, let's play this.
I want to be nice. They all say, I think he's changed. I think he's changed since 2 weeks ago. Something affected him. No, I haven't changed. Maybe I've gotten worse, actually, because I get angry.
Okay, I think this is an important clip because from what I understand, during this period of time I was away, there were journalists writing stories about how Trump has changed. He's moderated his messaging. And, some of the numbers indicate that some of the voters gave him temporarily the benefit of the doubt on this. I think this clip is important because he is saying out loud that he has not changed. He's gotten worse. And if I am a voter and I hear that, that is quite scary to me, because I'm like, here is a guy who I'm an independent. I wasn't willing to tell a pollster before that I was ready to vote for this guy, but I was considering it. Now somebody shot at him, and now he's saying he's angry and he's going to be worse. That doesn't sound good.
No, that's a great point. Which, by the way, would be a pretty normal, like, psychological response.
For sure. It actually is totally understandable, but also disqualifying when you hear it.
Well, given the fact that he's, I'm sure, not a person who is likely to call up BetterHelp or go get treatment of any kind. Like I've obviously long said, that having experienced trauma or even to have PTSD of some kind, if you do, is not a disqualifier. You just treat it like any other injury. Donald Trump is not a person who, well, all the things that have happened in his life that you could regard as traumatic or needing to be dealt with, he's never dealt with any of them, nor will he ever. And it looks to me like the same thing might be true of JD Vance, by the way. So, all right, before we go, speaking of all this, the last thing here to cover is we're in the middle of the Democratic Veep stakes. And I'm just curious if you have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, I have had experience with most of the people here, as I imagine you do too. I know Pete the most. I think Pete is a generational talent. I've seen him so many times, and I have such great things to say about him. I don't think he's going to be the pick for a lot of reasons, but I think he always wins by losing. He's always just like, he doesn't get picked, but he shows everybody how talented he is, and I continue to think he's a great guy who has a lot to say, and I always root for Pete. Mark Kelly, I have had the experience of seeing up close, and I think he's got a great bio. I think he's a super compelling figure. I wouldn't say I'm enamored by his like retail skills as a politician. I've seen him give some long, boring speeches, honestly, over the years, including at the Arena Summit. But giving a speech isn't the only skill, right? So put that aside. I think it's going to be Shapiro. I spent some time in swing districts during 2022 in Pennsylvania. He is very popular. I met a lot of Republicans who loved him as attorney general. And obviously, I think he won like 15 points or something in that race. Like, he is super popular in a state we need to win. He's very energetic, very smart. He's been a great governor. Bonus points. He has education views that very much track with mine, which is a mark against him probably with a lot of the constituencies of Democrats. But he's somebody who has an idiosyncratic sort of series of views that he seems to have come by honestly, which makes him interesting to me. But more importantly, like, he is popular in a state we need to win. He's a governor, and he has the kind of unifying language that really matters here, and he's very good at delivering that language. So I think he checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same place in the sense that I have pretty good personal relationship. I don't know Tim Walz, and I don't really know Cooper, but I guess he took himself out of it. But I know I had dinner with Pete like 3 weeks ago. So I'm on the board of Gifford, so I've worked with Mark Kelly a lot. I like him a lot. I tend to be inclined toward having bets on the ticket. But I'm with you. Shapiro's great. I've worked with him just a little bit, but he's clearly really popular in a state that we got to win. And also, one of the most important qualifications, if not the most, of a vice president is that could they be president? I absolutely think he could. So, take off my vet hat, put on my Jew hat, and root for the guy.
Well, I texted you this: a half Indian and a Jew. It sounds like majority 54.
Yeah, it's a majority 54 ticket, man.
It's too on the nose. Yeah, I don't know. This is exciting times, Jason. That's all I gotta say.
Lots changed. I mean, it's like the weather in Kansas City. You don't like it, stick around. That's how our politics are right now.
Right? Like, sometimes if I don't watch the Bills game, they do well. And now, I don't know, maybe I always take off during this period of time during the elections. Maybe I'll go dark during the election week period, and hopefully that'll give us good vibes.
Let's just hope in a few months the football comparison we're drawing to the Democratic Party is the Chiefs, not the Bills. Let's just try to get there. All right. We have about a minute left for one for us. What would you like to? Is there anything about the last couple of weeks you can share?
I can't really. I can't yet talk about what I've been working on. It's so kooky that it almost would seem unbelievable. But I went up. I'll just say I took 2 weeks off, but didn't really take 2 weeks off. I worked on perhaps the hardest of the. I do like one skill a year thing, and this was related to that, and it was the hardest thing I've done probably since starting a school. And it was fun to do. I know this is super vague, but it was fun. And
I know what you're talking about. And one day we will reveal it.
We'll talk about it. But it was great to do. And it was basically doing like an ultra marathon for the brain, and I feel like I've come out the other side of it in a good place, but grateful to have it behind me and excited to be back in Podcast-istan. What have you been up to for 2 weeks?
A lot of grown-up baseball and kid baseball, other stuff. I think one of the, I had a lot of fun. True made the like all-star game. They play it's second year in a row. They play a Kansas versus Missouri all-star game, and True was selected for it again and had a great time. It was real fun. He played on Team Missouri, but his team, everybody else on the team is from Kansas. This is all, by the way, for people who don't come from the Kansas City area. Ravi, that it's one big metro area. But so, he got a hit off of a buddy on his team that he usually plays on, who had made the Team Kansas team. So True got a hit off. I mean, so that was all real fun. And they give him a ring. I mean, it's hilarious, like a really serious looking ring. And so that was fun. And then Bella, I just have a quick Bella story that's cute. Is that?
Well, can I just say something about True? I sent you this message on Instagram. First of all, he's getting big. He's growing. Like it looks like he's going to be near 6 feet. Kind of. I think you're.
Oh God, I hope so. I'm going to tell him you said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he really wants to be.
Well, my feeling. He needs to keep eating though.
Yes.
Or start is probably a better way to put it.
We've been working on it.
But he looks so much like his mother. Like I couldn't believe it. Like I mean, you always like your wife has strong genes. I see it even in Bella. But it's like, whatever transformation he's made over the past 6 months, he looks even more. I was looking at the photo. I'm like, oh my God, it's like a spitting image of your wife. It's unbelievable.
I think also part of it is it's summer, so he's just darker than, and she's much darker than me, and so I think that's part of. But yeah, they do look alike. And Bella recently, so here's a funny parenting thing, since we talked a lot about the parenting stuff. One thing I've noticed is that she has really tapped into this whole, like, I can get mom and dad's attention by if I'm hurt or if I'm sad. And so I've been consciously trying to push back on this damsel in distress routine. Right. So last night, I was putting her to bed and she tripped on the carpet, clearly was not hurt, but affected this whole I'm really sad, I'm hurt thing. And I said to her, I said, Bella, if you want daddy's attention, Bella, for those who don't know, will turn 4 in September. If you want daddy's attention, you don't have to pretend to be hurt or sad. You can just say that you want my attention. And so she takes this deep breath, like stands up, looks me right in the eye and says, okay, I trust you. Which I thought was so funny. I just thought that was like, it was this deeply serious thing from a 3.5-year-old who I didn't even know had the word trust. I didn't know she had that in her lexicon. So, all right, with that, I don't know, maybe JD Vance is happy with that little anecdote. I'm not sure. I think he'll only be happy if he finds that she chooses to have children and not work. But we'll end it there. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. Everybody, please leave a 5-star review. You can find me on social at Jason Kander. You can find Ravi at Ravi M. Gupta. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.